My name is Alara Finch. If you were to ask me what I do, I wouldn't say I'm a CEO or an entrepreneur, though technically both are true. I would tell you that I build quiet places. I am a landscape designer, but more than that, I am an architect of serenity. I work with stone and soil, with water and light, creating gardens and private sanctuaries along the wild, misty coast of Oregon. My home is in a small, windswept town called Seaglass Bay, where the Pacific breathes a constant, rhythmic sigh, and the fog rolls in to soften the edges of the world. It's a life I carved out of silence and resilience, a world away from the one I was born into. My childhood was spent 3 hours inland, in the flat, grid-like city of Riverbend, a place that values practicality above all else. My father, Arthur, was a shift supervisor at the local paper mill for 40 years. He was a man of calloused hands and unwavering routine, a man who believed in pensions, union security, and the tangible weight of a job well done. My mother, Eleanor, orchestrated our lives with the precision of a field marshal, her primary concern being the immaculate appearance of our lawn and the quiet approval of our neighbors. They were good, predictable people who believed in a single, unyielding path to a good, predictable life. You go to school, you get a sensible degree, you find a stable job, you marry, you retire, and you die. I was meant to be an accountant. It was a future they had chosen with the same care they used to select linoleum for the kitchen floor, durable, sensible, and utterly devoid of inspiration. For 2 years, I tried. I sat in lecture halls under fluorescent lights, my mind drifting from balance sheets to the interplay of moss on stone, from amortization schedules to the way light filters through the canopy of an old-growth fir. The numbers felt like a cage. My soul was with the earth. The day I told them I was leaving university to study horticultural design at a small, specialized college on the coast was not a day of celebration. It was a day of quiet, profound disappointment. There was no screaming, no dramatic pointing at the door. It was worse. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that settled over our small living room, the air thick with their unuttered judgment. Playing in the dirt, my father said finally, not looking at me but at the television, his jaw tight. That's a hobby, Alara. Not a career. What will we tell the neighbors? My mother whispered, her hands twisting a dish towel in her lap. Helen's daughter is in law school. My older brother, Leo, who was already a junior loan officer at the local bank, just shook his head with a condescending smirk. You'll be back in 6 months, asking for money. You always were a dreamer. That was the moment I felt the tectonic plates of my life shift. I looked at their faces, my father's stony disapproval, my mother's anxious shame, my brother's smug certainty, and I knew I was utterly alone. There was no support here, only the expectation that I would shrink myself to fit the small box they had built for me. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stood up from the floral patterned sofa that had held all our family's unspoken tensions for 2 decades. I won't be back asking for anything, I said, my voice softer than I expected, but steady. I'm going to go pack. They didn't try to stop me. As I carried my boxes out to my old, sputtering hatchback, I saw my mother watching from the kitchen window, her expression a mixture of grief and relief. They were letting go of a daughter they no longer understood, a problem they no longer had to solve. The finality of it was a cold, clean ache in my chest. As I drove west, toward the ocean, the flat, orderly landscape of Riverbend slowly gave way to the rolling hills and dense forests of the coastal range. With each mile, I felt the weight of their expectations sloughing off me like a heavy coat. I wasn't running away in shame. I was driving toward the quiet promise of becoming myself. The first few years were a lesson in beautiful, humbling poverty. I lived in a tiny, drafty apartment above a fishing tackle shop in Seaglass Bay. The scent of brine and damp was a constant companion. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner, cleaning rental cabins, and stocking shelves at the local nursery, all while attending classes. My hands were perpetually stained with soil and my muscles ached, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly alive. My work was my sanctuary. I didn't just learn about plants. I learned about ecosystems, about patience, about how to listen to a piece of land until it told you what it wanted to be. My final graduation project wasn't just a blueprint. It was a fully realized healing garden I designed and installed for a local community health clinic, funded by small grants and donated materials I'd hustled for months. It was a space of quiet contemplation, with a trickling water feature made from reclaimed river stones, native ferns unfurling in the shade of a dogwood tree, and winding paths designed to slow the walker's pace and calm the mind. That garden became my first business card. People started to notice. A doctor from the clinic hired me to redesign his backyard. His neighbor, a retired architect, saw my work and commissioned me to create a Japanese-inspired moss garden for her cliffside home. Word of mouth is a powerful force in a small town. I started my company, Viridianscapes, with a second-hand laptop and a rusted-out pickup truck. I never advertised. My work spoke for itself. My philosophy was simple. I didn't impose a design on a landscape. I collaborated with it. I specialized in creating spaces that felt as if they had always been there, seamlessly blending human artistry with the wildness of the Oregon coast. My clients were often people seeking refuge from the noise of the world, artists, writers, tech executives who wanted a place to unplug. They didn't want ostentatious displays of wealth, they wanted peace. And peace, I discovered, was a valuable commodity. Over the next decade, Viridianscapes grew slowly, organically, like one of my gardens. I hired a small, dedicated team. We took on larger projects, a clifftop meditation retreat, the grounds of a boutique eco-hotel, a sprawling coastal estate for a reclusive novelist. I never sought the spotlight. I found my validation in the quiet satisfaction of a completed project, in the gratitude of a client who found solace in a space I had helped create. My life in Seaglass Bay settled into a gentle rhythm. I bought a small cedar shingled house overlooking a protected cove. My mornings began with a walk on the beach, collecting stones and watching the oyster catchers patrol the shoreline. My days were spent on site, my hands in the earth, or in my studio, sketching designs while listening to the rain patter against the skylights. I built a chosen family: Maeve, the wise, sharp-witted owner of the town's art gallery; Ben, a carpenter whose joinery was pure poetry; and a handful of other creative, kind-hearted souls who had, like me, washed up on this shore in search of something truer. I rarely thought of my family in Riverbend. The ache of their rejection had long since faded into a dull, distant scar. We exchanged sterile Christmas cards. My mother would call on my birthday, the conversation stilted and brief, never once asking what I was working on, only if I was eating properly. They knew I was self-employed, that I did landscaping, but in their minds, I was likely still the struggling girl playing in the dirt, a cautionary tale for their friends' more successful children. I never corrected them. Their opinion of me was no longer a mirror I looked into. The ocean, the forest, the land itself, that was my mirror now. It showed me I was strong, resilient, and capable of creating immense beauty from nothing. The life they said I'd never have, I had built it. Not with a degree in accounting, but with dirt-caked fingernails, an artist's eye, and a stubborn refusal to be anything other than myself. I wasn't a millionaire in the flashy sense. My wealth was quiet, tied up in my business, my property, and the deep, unshakable peace I had cultivated in my own heart. I didn't need their approval. I had my own. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a raw, blustery day, and I was in my studio, finalizing the lighting plan for a terraced garden that cascaded down a steep bluff to the sea. My phone buzzed, displaying my mother's name. I let it go to voicemail, assuming it was the usual perfunctory check-in. An hour later, she called again. And again. By the end of the day, there were 7 missed calls. This was unusual. My mother's communication style was one of disciplined infrequency. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I finally listened to the last voicemail. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges. Alara, darling, it's your mother. Could you please call me back? It's important. The forced cheerfulness in her tone was more alarming than outright panic would have been. I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I went for a walk on the beach, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I needed the cold, salty air to clear my head. For years, I had built a fortress of peace around my life, and this felt like a stone being hurled at its walls. The old conditioning, the deeply ingrained pull of filial duty, warred with the hard-won self-respect I had so carefully nurtured. The next morning, my brother Leo called. I decided to answer. Alara, he said, his voice stripped of its usual condescending smoothness. He sounded strained. Mom's been trying to reach you. I know. I've been busy, I replied, my tone neutral. He let out a frustrated sigh. Look, we're in some trouble. Serious trouble. I waited, my hand resting on the smooth, cool surface of a piece of driftwood on my desk. Dad's pension. The mill went bankrupt last year, and the fund was mismanaged. It's gone. Almost all of it. He paused, and I could hear the difficulty in his voice. And they made some investments on the side. Some guaranteed return thing a guy at their church was pushing. It was a scam. They lost everything they had in savings. The world tilted slightly. My father, the ultimate pragmatist, the man who preached the gospel of safe, boring investments, had been duped. It was a story as old as time. They've been trying to keep up appearances, Leo continued, his voice dropping. Putting things on credit cards. But the bank is calling. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage. They're going to foreclose. I closed my eyes, picturing the house on Poplar Street. The perfectly manicured lawn, the rose bushes my mother fussed over, the concrete porch my father, and I had poured one hot summer when I was 16. A house of stifling expectations, yes, but also the only home they had ever known. What do you want from me, Leo? I asked quietly. His defensiveness flared for a moment. What do you think I want? They need help. I'm doing what I can, but I've got my own mortgage, kids to feed. You're the one off on the coast, living your artist life. We all know you're doing well for yourself. The accusation in his voice was unmistakable. The dreamer, the flake, had somehow landed on her feet, and now it was her duty to bail out the sensible ones. They need about $80,000 to get clear with the bank and pay off the immediate debts, he said, the number hanging in the air between us. It wasn't a world-shattering sum to me now, but it was a universe away from the girl who had left their house with $200 and a broken heart. Have they asked you to call me? I asked. A long silence. No, he admitted. Dad's too proud. Mom's too ashamed. But they're drowning, Alara. They're your parents. They're your parents. The ultimate trump card. The phrase meant to override years of quiet neglect and dismissal. I need to think, I said, and ended the call before he could argue. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, unable to focus on my work. I walked through my own garden, touching the leaves of the ferns, the rough bark of the shore pines. This space, this life, was my creation. I had built it without them, in spite of them. Did I owe them a piece of it now? I remembered my father's words. That's a hobby, Alara. I remembered my mother's shame. They hadn't believed in me, not for a single moment. They weren't asking for help from their daughter. They were asking for help from a successful stranger who happened to share their DNA. That evening, I called Maeve. I sat in her cluttered, paint-spattered studio, a mug of herbal tea warming my hands, and told her everything. She listened without interruption, her gaze steady and compassionate. They didn't throw you a rope when you were in the water, she said simply when I had finished. They watched you learn to swim on your own. Now they've fallen in, and they expect you to be their lifeguard. But they're my parents, I whispered, hating how the words tasted like an excuse. Yes, they are, Maeve said, her voice gentle but firm. And you're their daughter. The one they dismissed. The one whose dreams they belittled. Helping them isn't the question, Alara. The question is how. Giving them money might save their house, but it won't fix the foundation of your relationship. It might just paper over the cracks and reset the old dynamic, with you as the quiet, capable fixer they can resent for having been right all along. Her words landed with the clear, ringing truth of a bell. She was right. This wasn't just about money. It was about rewriting a story that had been set in stone for years. And I was no longer a character they could control. 2 days later, they showed up. I was at a local cafe, a cozy place called the Salty Mug, reviewing a planting schedule with Ben, my carpenter. I saw their car pull up outside, a 10-year-old sedan, meticulously clean but showing its age. My heart gave a painful lurch. They got out, looking small and out of place against the backdrop of driftwood art and salty sea air. My father, in his neatly pressed slacks, and my mother, clutching her purse like a shield. They peered through the window, saw me, and hesitated. I took a deep breath, excused myself from Ben, and walked outside to meet them on the sidewalk. The wind was brisk, carrying the smell of low tide. "Mom." "Dad," I said, my voice even. "Alara," my mother said, forcing a brittle smile. "We were just in the area. We thought we'd see your town." It was such a flimsy lie. It was almost pitiable. My father just grunted, his eyes scanning the street, avoiding my face. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slumped with a weight that wasn't just age. "Let's sit down," I suggested, gesturing back toward the cafe. We found a quiet booth in the corner. I ordered them coffee. The silence was excruciating. My mother fussed with a sugar packet. My father stared out the window at the gray, churning ocean as if it held the answers. "Leo told me what's happening," I said, deciding to cut through the pretense. My mother's face crumpled slightly. My father's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing in his cheek. "He shouldn't have done that," he muttered. "Why not?" I asked, my voice soft. "Are you not in trouble? Is the bank not threatening to foreclose?" He flinched, but didn't answer. "We didn't want to be a burden," my mother said, her voice trembling. We made some mistakes." "You raised us to be proud," my father added, finally looking at me. His gaze was a confusing mix of resentment, shame, and a desperate, unspoken plea. "Not to ask for handouts." "I'm not a handout, Dad. I'm your daughter." The words came out with more force than I intended. "The one who you said was chasing a hobby. The one who you thought would come crawling back." The truth of it hung in the air, sharp and uncomfortable. My mother started to cry softly into a napkin. "We didn't understand," she wept. "We just wanted you to be secure. You wanted me to be what you understood," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." I let them sit with that for a moment. I saw them not as the powerful, judgmental figures of my childhood, but as who they were now, scared, proud, and lost. A wave of compassion washed over me, but it was a new kind of compassion, one that was clear-eyed and boundaried. "I won't give you the money to pay off the bank," I said. My father's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and wounded pride. "I knew it," he bit out. "I told you, Eleanor. We wasted the gas." "Please let me finish," I said, holding his gaze until he settled back, sullen. "Giving you a check would be easy for me, but it solves nothing. It just makes me the bank, and it puts us right back into an old, broken pattern. I won't do that. For any of us." I leaned forward. "But here is what I will do. I have a financial planner. She's brilliant and compassionate. I will pay for you to have as many sessions with her as you need. She can help you navigate this, negotiate with the bank, set up a realistic budget. I will also pay for a full year of a legal service that specializes in debt consolidation and foreclosure prevention. They can represent you. I will give you the best tools and the best professional help available. But the work of rebuilding, that has to be yours." I sat back, my heart pounding. I had offered them a bridge, not a lifeboat. I had offered them empowerment, not a rescue that would leave them feeling beholden and resentful. My father stared at me, his expression unreadable. My mother looked from him to me, her face streaked with tears. "So you'll pay strangers to help us, but you won't help us yourself?" my father asked, his voice thick with bitterness. "I am helping you," I said calmly. "I'm helping you in the way I believe is truly best. I'm giving you a way to stand on your own feet again." He shook his head, a look of profound, stubborn pride hardening his features. He stood up, throwing a few dollars on the table for the coffees. "No, we don't need a stranger telling us how to manage our own lives. We'll figure it out ourselves." He turned and walked out of the cafe without a backward glance. My mother hesitated, her eyes pleading with me. "Alara, please." "He made his choice, Mom," I said softly. "And you have to make yours." She looked at the door her husband had just walked through, then back at me, her face a mask of indecision and sorrow. Then, with a quiet sob, she followed him. I sat alone in the booth, the coffees growing cold. I had held my boundary. I had acted from a place of love and respect for them and for myself. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a deep, resonant grief for the family we could never be. But underneath the grief, there was a quiet, steady hum of strength. I had not broken. In the weeks that followed, a profound silence descended. No calls, no texts. I didn't know if they had lost the house, if they had found another way. Leo wouldn't return my calls. I had been excised, once again. The pain of it was real, but it was different this time. It wasn't the sharp sting of rejection from my youth. It was the dull ache of acceptance. I had done what I could, in the way that felt right and true. Their refusal to accept my help was their story to write, not mine. I poured my energy back into my work, into the soil and the stone that had always been my solace. About 2 months later, I received an email from a prominent architectural digest. They wanted to do a feature on Viridianscapes. They had seen my work at the Cliffside Eco Hotel and were captivated by my philosophy of quiet design. My first instinct was to say no. I had never sought publicity, but then I thought about it. This wasn't about ego. It was about honoring my work, the path I had forged on my own terms. It was a validation that had nothing to do with my family and everything to do with my own vision. I said yes. The photo shoot and interview took place on a perfect Oregon day, the sky a high, clear blue. The writer was thoughtful, her questions insightful. We talked about sustainability, about the psychology of space, about the healing power of nature. The photographer captured my home, my gardens, and me barefoot on a mossy path, my hands resting on a sun-warmed boulder, a quiet smile on my face. The resulting article was titled, "Rooted in Resilience: How Alara Finch Builds Sanctuaries for the Soul." It was a beautiful, respectful piece that celebrated not my financial success, but the heart of my work. The magazine hit the newsstands. A few days later, a letter arrived at my studio. The envelope was plain, the handwriting my mother's. I opened it with a sense of dread. Inside was a single, folded page from the magazine, the title page of my article, with the photo of me in my garden. There was no note, no explanation. Just the article itself. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it an olive branch? A white flag? Or a silent, bitter acknowledgement of the world I had built without them? That weekend, another letter arrived. This one was from my mother. Her handwriting was shaky. "Dear Alara, we saw the article. Your cousin brought a copy over. The pictures of your home, your gardens, they are beautiful. Arthur won't say it, but he sat with it for a long time. He read every word. I know we have no right to ask you for anything. Your offer at the cafe, we were proud and foolish. We were scared. We ended up taking a reverse mortgage on the house. It will keep us afloat for now, but it feels like we're slowly selling off our future. It's not a solution. I don't know what I am trying to say, except that I am sorry. I was so worried about what others would think, I forgot to think about who my own daughter was becoming. I see it now. I see you. I don't expect you to reply. I just wanted you to know. Love, Mom." I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a manipulation. It felt real. The apology I had stopped waiting for years ago. The acknowledgement I never thought I'd receive. I placed the letter on my desk, next to the smooth, gray stone I'd picked up from the beach that morning. I thought about forgiveness. Maeve had once told me that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back into your life. It's about letting the poison out of your own heart. It's a gift you give yourself. I had already forgiven them long ago for my own peace of mind. But this letter, this was something else. It was a crack of light in a door that had been sealed shut for over a decade. My story with them doesn't have a neat ending. There was no tearful reunion, no grand gesture that healed all the old wounds overnight. But something did shift. I wrote my mother back a short, simple note. I told her I was glad they were safe and that I had received her letter. I enclosed the business card of my financial planner. A week later, my mother called. She told me they had made an appointment. My father, she said, had agreed to go. It was a start. Our relationship today is a quiet, fragile thing, like a newly planted sapling. We speak on the phone every few weeks. The conversations are still awkward at times, navigating the vast, unmapped territory between our two worlds. They haven't visited Seaglass Bay again, and I haven't been back to Riverbend. The distance is still necessary, a buffer zone that allows this tentative new growth to happen without being trampled by the weight of the past. Sometimes, when I am walking in one of my gardens as dusk settles, the fog blurring the line between sea and sky, I think about the roots of things. The roots of a family, tangled and deep, capable of both anchoring and strangling. And the roots I have put down here in this coastal soil that have allowed me to grow tall and strong on my own. I don't know if our family will ever be fully healed. Perhaps some breaks are too deep to ever mend completely. But I have learned that healing isn't about returning to what was. It's about creating something new from the broken pieces. It's about building a sanctuary, first in your own heart, and then, if you're lucky, finding a small, quiet space where you can finally meet the people you love, not as who you were supposed to be, but as who you truly are. And for now, that is more than enough.